So I will ask that we have the program spotlighted so that I can walk you through it. So media team, if you can actually share the screen that includes the program, I would appreciate that. If not, you can make me host and I will do that. Thank you very much. So if you can scroll a little bit, maybe up to mid-morning. So right now we've just started. We've finished with breakfast on this side. We hope you've had your cup of coffee wherever you are. Really the background to this study is that Save the Children is paying a lot of attention to social protection. I have prepared some slides. I don't know if they can be shared, but I will basically go through them. But basically, we will have an overview of the background to the study. We will have welcome remarks from the country director. We'll have welcome remarks from the permanent secretary, Mr. Kibenge. Then we'll have a presentation by Anne Tran. I did not introduce her because she will actually get a chance to introduce herself when she makes the presentation shortly. And we are expecting the Honorable Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development to come, and she will give her speech and officially launch the report. If you can scroll lower, please. We expect to have a break, a very short health break after the minister to allow the media to interview her, but also to refresh because we've been here for quite a while, and then we will get into our panel discussion. We've got our panelists already queued up. Ibrahim was online, but he's actually expected to be here in the next 10 minutes. Dr. Patrick Twesige is already here. He has introduced himself. And we've got the Commissioner, Mr. Fred Ngabirano, who will also join the panel. And finally, Patrick Kichoncho Katabazi, who will give us the political economy of social protection in Uganda. After that, we will have a Q&A session. And so please, especially if you're online, make sure to take notes, put your comments in the chat. We have a colleague here who is monitoring the chat and will be able to pick that. Can you please show the slides that I gave to you, colleagues, because I would like to go through the overview of and background of this study. Thank you. So as the slides get ready, I just wanted to say, and I think a lot of people will repeat the words that I'm going to say now, that Save the Children globally is really, really interested in making sure that the lives of children are at the forefront of what we do. We really would like the world to put children and young people at the heart of its action. So we're really challenging the entire world to put children and young people at the heart of its action, and children as the main beneficiaries. Please don't go forward, please go back to the slide before this. We want children to be at the heart of this discussion. We want them because they are the beneficiaries. We really aspire for a world in which every child attains the right to survive, to be protected, and to achieve the full breadth and depth of their development potential while participating in the processes that enable them to do that. Our mission is to inspire breakthroughs in the way the world treats children and achieve immediate and lasting change in their lives. And in all we do, we want to demonstrate our values of accountability, ambition, collaboration, creativity, and integration. Now, most of you in the room and online know that I was working at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development and then WFP over the past 10 years. But one of the reasons I joined Save the Children was the ambition. We are working to achieve 3 global breakthroughs to ensure that all children in the world, please go back to the previous slide, thank you. Previous slide, thank you very much. Next one. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our 3 breakthroughs are survival. No child should die from preventable causes before their 5th birthday. We want all children to learn. We want all children to learn from a quality basic education, and we want all children to be protected. We really want to fight violence against children. We want to make sure that violence against children is no longer tolerated. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. So these are our results for 2030. We want to make sure that caregivers have sufficient incomes at all times to meet the essential needs of their children, because this is how children survive, learn, and get protected. We want, across all societies in the world, families who are poor to be resilient against disasters and shocks so that they can continue to invest in their children's survival, learning, and protection. We want adolescent girls and boys who have deprived to have the opportunity to build the skills, the networks, and self-esteem they need to make the transition to safe and decent livelihoods. And we want all countries to adopt national or subnational monitoring and action plans for the reduction of child poverty and its associated deprivations in survival, learning, and protection. Next slide. Apologies, the technology isn't working the way we wanted it to. But basically, I wanted to talk about the reason why we focus on cash and social protection. But since it's going to be the focus of the discussion today, maybe we can actually leave that part. But the key point is that cash or cash transfers is the best evidenced anti-poverty measure available globally. And it's an important part of humanitarian responses. Save the Children works a lot in humanitarian responses. And Cash Plus, which is really integration of other things in the cash, our measures have the best impact on child outcomes, and they are our unique selling position as Save the Children. So we promote cash because cash can help to address the multiple dimensions of poverty and enable children to learn, to survive, and to be protected. In fact, in Uganda, Save the Children, with funding from Save the Children Italy, is working with WFP in West Nile to implement a child-sensitive social protection program in 2 refugee hosting districts of Madi Okolo and Terego. And a key part of that is to strengthen the capacity of local governments to implement the national social protection programs. We are aiming to contribute to prevention of malnutrition among refugees and the host community, especially targeting pregnant and lactating women under 2. I'll stop the presentation there and basically get back to sharing the agenda, and in particular to the background to this study. Because of this aspiration as Save the Children, we are very keen to support the government of Uganda's efforts. to build a child-sensitive social protection system. And so within that context, we contracted Development Pathways, who are the authors of this report. We contracted them to conduct an assessment of the child sensitivity of our existing social protection programs in Uganda. And so we wanted to analyze the system to see whether it's child sensitive and then provide recommendations that can improve outcomes for children across Uganda. And Anne is actually going to explain the main investigation questions. But a key point I wanted to make here is that throughout this process, Save the Children worked very closely with the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, as well as colleagues across the sector, in particular members of the thematic committee. I know a lot of you are online. To conduct this analysis, we had very rich discussions with all of you, and this report was validated by the thematic committee in September earlier this year. And this report articulates very clear learnings from the programs we have on the ground, both by government and development partners, and it also outlines a set of recommendations. In the room here, everybody has that one page which summarizes the key findings and recommendations, and online we will also share with you the final copy of the report as well as the recommendations, but I've shared the event brief. Actually, we have appended that in the event brief. So with that background, I would like to welcome my colleague Dragana Strinik to come and welcome us to this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Good morning. The Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, Mr. Agrey David Kibenge, honourable members of Parliament, representatives of the ministries, representatives of donor community, UN agencies, non-governmental organizations and civil society, all invited guests present both in this conference room and virtually, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you to the launch of the Child-Sensitive Social Protection Systems Analysis Report for Uganda. On behalf of Save the Children, I would like to extend our profound gratitude to the Government of Uganda for collaboration on this analytical work and the launch today. And we are also eagerly awaiting the presence of the Honourable Minister, Ms. Amongi Betyongom, today to give the keynote speech and launch of the report. Tomorrow is the World's Children's Day, the day when the Convention on the Rights of the Child was adopted, and the day when we internationally promote welfare of children. We are proud that with this report, we are marking the day, while setting a case for investing into child-sensitive social protection in Uganda as one of the key means to achieve children's rights, and also as a child right in itself. Child poverty remains one of the greatest challenges for human capital development, economic growth, and human dignity. Ending extreme child poverty and halving it by 2030 is a global commitment made through Sustainable Development Goal 1, including the Target 1.3 for nationally defined social protection floors. There are 56% of children in Uganda living in multidimensional poverty. Children from poor households are less likely to receive adequate care, nutrition, health, and education necessary to achieve their full potential. This results in intergenerational transmission of poverty. The drivers of child poverty, such as climate shocks, or long-term socioeconomic effects of COVID-19 and others, will continue to affect these children and their families for the years to come. While it is critical to ensure the free access to high-quality schooling and health services for all children, including children who are experiencing significant vulnerabilities, this alone will not achieve adequate health and education outcomes if families lack sufficient income to invest adequately into their children's well-being. When children experience poor diets, for example, and especially in the first 1,000 days of their lives, this undermines their health, education, and general development. This report demonstrates that in order to strengthen human capital by improving health and education outcomes for children, it is essential to invest into social protection, including social security, social care, and support services. Social protection schemes, in particular direct income support, are essential means of ensuring that families in need can access a minimum income to provide adequate care for their children. An investment into child-sensitive social protection represents an investment in Uganda's future growth and prosperity, in strengthening Uganda's human capital and building the foundations of a skilled and healthy workforce. We applaud the Government of Uganda for putting in place policy proposals which align with objectives to achieve a more child-sensitive social protection system. The social protection sector in Uganda has achieved a great deal over the past decade. The COVID-19 crisis presents both a challenge and an opportunity to build on and accelerate these efforts. We support government's efforts and the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, who is leading on the development of a long-term social protection strategy to put into life the vision for an inclusive social security system and to evolve an effective social care and social support services system. The social protection strategy will be critical to realizing the aspirations outlined in the Human Capital Development Programme Implementation Action Plan for NDP 3.
Recording in progress.
This report makes a plea to prioritize planned investments in social protection for the benefit of children in Uganda and makes practical recommendations on adjustments to existing schemes in order to increase overall coverage of children, which is currently abysmal. Establishing clear targets for a government-led financing strategy for social protection will enable the Government of Uganda to realize its life cycle-based vision for social protection. Save the Children is committed supporting the Government of Uganda's efforts to enhance the social protection system and ensuring that social protection measures lead to meaningful investment in children. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank everyone who contributed and who worked on this study and the report. Big thanks go to Ann Chan from Development Pathways and also to our colleague Burcu Munoz Gadiali from Save the Children Malawi. They are both online today. Thank you for a great job in championing the study, conducting the analysis, and writing the report. We also appreciate the support from other colleagues at Save the Children International and Save the Children here in Uganda. We are equally grateful to a wide range of people who provided their time to offer valuable insights and feedback during consultations and validation meetings. In particular, we appreciate the support provided by the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, particularly Mr. Agrey David Kibenge, Permanent Secretary, James Ebitu, Fred Ngabirano, and colleagues from the Social Protection Directorate, NUSAF, and DRDIP at the Office of the Prime Minister, members of the Social Protection Thematic Committee, UNICEF, World Food Programme, and the World Bank, who provided feedback during multiple stages of this study. I hope that this excellent report, with so many keen contributions, will generate a dialogue and debate on the challenges identified as a crucial component of Uganda's human capital development process. Now is the right time to focus on developing an inclusive and child-sensitive national social protection system in Uganda, so we can move to the future we all want to see for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dragana. Please give her a loud round of applause. Thank you. I would like to now invite Mr. David Agre Kibenge, the Permanent Secretary and Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, who are the co-hosts of this event and, in fact, the report. Mr. Kibenge, you're welcome.
The Honourable Member of Parliament here present, and in case there are others online, the Country Director, Save the Children, representatives of our partner agencies, colleagues from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and any other line ministries, departments and agencies of government, the panelists who will shortly be taking to the podium, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and on my own behalf, I take this honor to welcome all of you to the launch of this very important report entitled Child-Sensitive Social Protection in Uganda, an Analysis of Direct Income Support. I would like to begin by thanking and congratulating colleagues both from within my ministry and Save the Children for a very thorough analysis of child-sensitive issues in social protection programming in Uganda. In the same vein, I would like to thank the Honourable Betty Amongi Ongom, the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, who will be, as you've heard, joining us later to perform the launch, and her colleagues, the other ministers of state, for providing leadership that has enabled us to come up with this important milestone. I particularly want to appreciate our partnership with Save the Children in this analysis, through which we have reflected on our social protection system with child-sensitive lenses. We hope that all our partners can adopt the recommendations to improve outcomes for all children in Uganda. I thank the authors of this report and the panelists for the thoughts you have put into this work that will guide our discussion this morning. This kind of dialogue is important to the process of developing a robust and inclusive social protection system for our country. Ladies and gentlemen, as opposed to the notion that social protection is a consumptive undertaking, there is growing global evidence pointing to the fact that social protection is an effective strategy for promotion of sustainable economic growth. In addition, it's a proven tool for poverty and inequality reduction and promotion of social inclusion. And I think the focus on a social protection system that is child sensitive is one of the biggest investments that any country can make. Yesterday, I attended at Silver Springs Hotel a national dialogue on strategies to end gender-based violence. And I did remind everybody in the audience how important it was for us to invest in children, and that a country that neglects its children is certainly headed for disaster. I actually equated it to parents who do not take care, or people who do not take care of their gardens. And in the end, what we see is a jumble of weed. So the same analogy applies. If we don't invest in our children, if we don't take care of our children, if we don't put in place systems that assure our children survival and the protection we are talking about, we will certainly reap weed in this country and in the world. The government of Uganda, through the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, is committed to developing a comprehensive social protection system as a critical part of the National Development Strategy. The ministry will ensure that this process is evidence-based, and that's the value in the report that is going to be launched today. This report is a key milestone in that effort and will guide us as we finalize a comprehensive social protection strategy for our country. Ladies and gentlemen, Uganda has put in place a conducive policy and legal environment for implementation of social protection interventions across the life cycle. The right to social protection for all citizens is clearly set out in the 1995 Constitution, while Uganda is also a signatory to a number of international human rights agreements which stipulate the right of access to social security, including the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And Uganda has committed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 and the Social Protection Floors Recommendation 2012 to expand access to social protection schemes across the life cycle. Vision 2040 sets out the objective to implement a universal pension for every citizen above the age of 65 years, social protection systems for orphaned children, the disabled, and the destitute, for the vulnerable youth and other able-bodied persons. Social protection interventions will be channeled through public works schemes. That's what Vision 2040 says. And as the report points out, NDP 3 sets out the priority for the government to increase access to social protection across the life cycle. So social protection represents a core objective of the Human Capital Development Program under the NDP 3, which focuses on reducing vulnerability and gender inequality along the life cycle through expanding scope and coverage of care, support, and social protection services to most vulnerable groups. The National Social Protection Policy 2015, developed by the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, provides the framework for implementation of social protection interventions in Uganda. And that policy defines social protection as public and private interventions to address risks and vulnerabilities that expose individuals to income security and social deprivation, leading to undignified lives. It's therefore clear, ladies and gentlemen, that the implementation of the National Social Protection Policy is a shared responsibility among government, ministries, departments, and agencies, as it is with the private sector and non-state actors. The COVID-19 pandemic plus other shocks have highlighted the need for good data of the population, for social protection to work, for government and other stakeholders to be able to provide support to the citizens in a timely manner. It's important to have very good data on people. This is one of the areas government is working towards. I'm sure all of us here must have heard about the parish development model, where one of the pillars is the management, establishing a management information system right from parish level for purposes of generating reliable and timely data that can be used for planning. And in terms of data on children and other persons, we think that if we worked together with all the actors, we could very soon have that kind of data available. There is global evidence that an inclusive national social protection system is critical for enhancing human capital and fostering a more equitable growth and socio-economic transformation process. Ladies and gentlemen, Government of Uganda, through the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, is committed to developing a comprehensive social protection system as a critical part of the National Development Strategy, and the Ministry will ensure that this process is evidence-based, and this calls for effective collaboration between government, research institutions, development partners, and all other stakeholders. This report is therefore very timely and will contribute to improved delivery of social protection, especially to the children. As I conclude, I would like to thank every one of you once again for the tremendous contributions you've made to the social protection dialogue over the years. I want to thank our partner, Development Pathways, and Save the Children for a job well done. Thank you all that have enabled the growth of social protection in Uganda. I would like to welcome you once again, ladies and gentlemen, and these were just welcome remarks. I'm not opening, but I just had to make a few of those remarks. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Agri, for those very powerful and reassuring remarks about government's commitment to an inclusive and child-sensitive social protection system. Can you please give him another round of applause? Yeah, feel free to click that happy button and clap online as well. We are monitoring all that feedback. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite our colleague Antran from Development Pathways, who is coming in live from Zoom. And so we will actually be able to project that on the screen so everybody here can see that very clearly. So Anne, if you can please unmute yourself, share your screen, and take us. You are very welcome. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, David. I'm sharing my screen at the moment. Can I just verify that everybody can see me and see the screen and hear me correctly?
And can you hear us?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you as well. Are you
Okay.
able to share your screen?
I am currently sharing.
We are seeing it online.
Excellent. We can't see it here. We'll fix it. So please, Anne, go right ahead. Let this not bother you. We can see you.
Okay, great. I hope the screen will show up shortly then. My name is Anne Tran, as I have been introduced by David. I'm a social policy specialist at Development Pathways, and I've been working very closely alongside Save the Children and the Ministry of Gender to produce this study on child sensitivity of the social protection system. And I will not repeat all those that have already been mentioned, but I would really sincerely like to thank all the colleagues and partners who have supported this study and provided their insights and their inputs throughout this entire process. So I'll go ahead and go into the launch of this study and introduce you to some of the analysis and recommendations that we provided in the report. So to give a brief outline, I will firstly go into a couple of messages around the approach to understanding child-sensitive social protection and how we analyzed this concept. Then I will go into the rationale for child-sensitive social protection in Uganda and why it is really essential to invest in social protection that has impacts for children. I will then subsequently present the analysis and recommendations and provide some concluding remarks to the study. And if there is time, I would like to go into a couple of examples of child-focused programs in the region and to draw some lessons of where is Uganda and what can be achieved and what have other countries in the region been focusing on in terms of developing a more child-sensitive social protection system, including a case study of Kenya, which is currently planning an implementation of universal child benefits. Then I will take into account a brief Q&A. However, if I understand that it is also part of the agenda to have a more elaborate questions and answer session at the end. So I will follow David's guidance on this. So when we talk about child-sensitive social protection, what do we mean? So in Save the Children's definition, child-sensitive social protection refers to all the public policies, programs, and systems that address the specific patterns of child poverty and vulnerability that are rights-based in their approach and recognize the long-term developmental benefits of investing in children. And by setting up this definition, it's also quite key to understand the difference between what we mean by child-sensitive and child-focused social protection schemes. Whereas child-focused social protection schemes are really those schemes that are designed to directly benefit children, such as a child benefit. Child-sensitive schemes, however, refers to the whole set of policies and the whole system that either directly or indirectly has impacts for children. So in this analysis, we also looked at all those schemes that have been in place and what kind of indirect impacts they have on children. As, for example, an old age pension can have quite transformative impacts for children living in households and being cared for by older people as well. The main questions that we try to analyze in the analysis are, firstly, to what extent does Uganda's social protection policy framework currently consider and respond to the needs of children? So this really includes a stock take of what is already there and how effective is it. Secondly, what are the main gaps in terms of coverage and adequacy that deserve closer attention? And moving on, what are the current strengths and opportunities for advancing child sensitivity of social protection policy and programs so that they deliver more for Uganda's children? So really looking at this stock take and looking at the analysis and taking a forward-looking approach of what needs to be done and what can be achieved by Uganda to enhance the child sensitivity of the system. For this analysis, we based this on a framework that is called the Core Diagnostic Instruments. This is a framework developed by the OECD, which is a evaluation framework agency. And that develops a set of criteria for evaluation of social protection. These have been adapted to fit a more child-sensitive lens. And I know that there is quite a lot of information on this slide, but I won't go into it in detail. But to briefly capture these, we looked at the inclusiveness of the social protection scheme in terms of the reach of the number of children as a proportion of the child population, the impacts and adequacy, the appropriateness in terms of the needs of children, and as well as global frameworks that have been put in place on child-sensitive social protection, the extent to which the system currently respects the rights and dignity of families with children, governance and institutional capacity, the financial and fiscal sustainability, and the coherence and integration. And this looks at this takes a more holistic approach to analyzing the system and to what extent direct income support and other areas of the social protection system, as well as other services that aim to benefit children, are integrated and complement each other. And then lastly, we looked at the responsiveness of the system. And in responsiveness, we mainly also considered the ability of the social protection to address the needs of those affected by crises, as well as the support that has been provided to families during the COVID-19 emergency context. Some of the colleagues today have already really emphasized the severity of child poverty, and that really calls for urgent action to be taken now in order to provide children with a better start in life and to address the detrimental impacts that child poverty has on our society. Children globally make up more than half of the world's population living in poverty. And more than half of these children, as you can see in the bar graphs below, are currently in sub-Saharan Africa. This measures monetary child poverty in a situation based on data sets prior to the COVID-19 crisis. And as we all know, the COVID-19 crisis has worsened the situation of living standards globally, and with severe impacts for children. The impacts on poverty on children are really important to address because they are irreversible, as undermining children's start in life can have significant costs to society as children grow up, face inadequate opportunities in education, the labor markets, and this can, in fact, generate a vicious cycle of intergenerational poverty, affecting more generations to come. So why do we need to prioritize investments in social protection, particularly for children? Childhood is the period in life where we see the biggest returns on investment. And as I just mentioned earlier on the previous slide, undermining the investments in children can have detrimental impacts that can be irreversible. When children grow up living in poverty, this can have irreversible damage to children's well-being, which can have later costs to the economy and society. There is a wide range of evidence that has been published and researched for years that shows that regular access to social protection transfers can reduce can produce positive outcomes for children when families have income security and can constantly access a minimum income to ensure their children's living standards. And a skilled workforce is the result of countries being able to invest in their children. As the graph on the right shows, these are results from a study that indicates that when we invest in programs that are targeted to children in their earliest years, this can have significant returns. And this effect decreases slightly over time with the age of children. And it's really, and most of the returns that we see are really in those initial years of life between the age of 0 to 3. So zooming into Uganda, children in Uganda face a range of vulnerabilities and deprivations. 56% of children have been estimated to live in multidimensional poverty. And of course, we also need to acknowledge that poverty measures a specific situation in time. And in reality, living standards of families change all the time. And children might face different types of deprivations at different points in time related to their access to education, housing, information, health, water, sanitation, and food insecurity, as well as protection issues, such as experience of crime and being able to have adequate clothing. And it's important to emphasize these different dimensions of well-being because when we often think about child poverty, we often tend to get stuck on measuring monetary poverty in terms of income and consumption. But really, in reality, the idea of poverty and vulnerability is much more complex. And again, COVID-19 has worsened the situation, as this graph also indicates a situation in time that was before the global pandemic, which has also plummeted incomes in Uganda as well. Children are also heavily impacted by the composition of their families. And this is also important to consider the idea of child-sensitive social protection and how we need to also address the incomes of different people in the household. So for example, children living with single parents and caregivers face on average a higher likelihood of living in poverty, as well as skipped generation households where older persons are the sole responsible caregivers of children in the absence of any adult parents in the households. But overall, as this graph indicates, households that have children present are on average more likely to be living below the poverty rates, in particular larger households where household income is shared among a group of people. A very alarming impact on children as well is or a very alarming risk that children are facing is the risk of engaging in child labor in Uganda. And these numbers are quite alarming, nearly 14% of all children between the age of 5 to 17 years, so really at schooling age, are currently engaging in child labor. And this is particularly quite high among children of secondary school age, as this graph also shows that for both boys and girls, the percentage of children participating in child labor increases with age, and this ranges between 40% and 60% of those children in secondary school age that are engaging in work. So that is around half of these children that are that are forced to supplement the income of their families by engaging in work themselves, and therefore potentially also missing out on schooling as a result. Disabilities are also an important risk to consider facing children. So this graph shows the additional costs that are associated with having a disability. Children growing up in households, on average, as global studies show, have less income to cover their basic needs because there are a range of additional costs that they face in order to adapt their environment or adapt their situation to be able to factor in the fact that they have a disability, such as medical costs, but also costs for transportation or sign language interpretation. So this graph illustrates a very very theoretical concept of disability-related costs. As you see on the bar on the left side, this would be the income of a household without a person with a disability. And when we compare a household with a comparable income, but with a person with a disability, effectively the same amount of income that can be used to cover essential needs and other mainstream costs that is shown in dark red is substantially lower due to the added disability-related costs that need to be covered by the household. And so effectively, when you look at the bar on the right side, this is the income that a household with a child with a disability would need to achieve the same living standard as a household without a person with a disability. Whereas this evidence has not yet been generated in Uganda, studies across China, Vietnam, South Africa, and India show that provide an estimation of what the additional disability-related costs could entail. And these are as high as 40% of incomes in South Africa. However, in Uganda, recently the Ministry of Gender has also released a publication on the situation of people with disabilities, which did show that families with children with disabilities spend around 31% more on education-related costs in comparison to families without children with disabilities. And this is as high as 50% for children who have a severe form of disability. So based on this context, I'd like to go into the analysis and recommendations that we provided based on the study. Firstly, looking at inclusiveness, this graphic illustrates the range of schemes that we analyzed as part of mainly focusing on the direct income support schemes in Uganda that either directly or indirectly cover children. And as is shown, we focused on the two pilot initiatives, including the Child-Sensitive Social Protection Program in the West Nile, the Girls Empowering Girls social protection program for adolescent girls, which is implemented in Kampala, as well as the NUSAF 3 program in focusing on the labor-intensive public works component, and the Senior Citizens Grant, which is now universal for all older people above the age of 80 years. And while the pilot initiatives really show a very good achievement in terms of really putting child-focused schemes on the agenda for social protection. These currently still reach a limited proportion of children, which in this graphic has been disaggregated by different age groups. However, when we look at the overall coverage of all children, around 6.5% live of all children below the age of 18 years, which is equivalent to around 1.6 million children live in a household that accesses some form of social protection transfers. And this is largely due to the other mainstream social protection programs, actually, including NUSAF 3 and the Senior Citizens Grant. However, as I will go further into when we look at impacts and adequacy, the Senior Citizens Grant is currently the only scheme that provides a predictable income transfer to households, and really provides a mechanism to ensure families with minimal income security, or with minimum income security on a monthly basis. So when we compare this to the aim of covering all children who would need social protection and would essentially need it to cover their basic needs, when we compare this to the graph shown earlier, 56% of children live in multidimensional poverty, which means that most of these children effectively do not access any form of income transfer. And so coverage of Uganda's existing social protection schemes, if this were to reach all children living in multidimensional poverty, it would be around 12% of those children living in multidimensional poverty. And looking at all children nationally, over 93% of children do not access any form of income support at the moment. So, so this really emphasizes that starting off, reaching more children in Uganda is really a priority right now for social protection. Looking at impact and adequacy, I first wanted to zoom in on the Senior Citizens Grant and its known impacts on children. And this really emphasizes the child sensitivity of other social protection schemes across the life cycle by indirectly benefiting those children by providing a transfer to a member of their household or their caregiver. So the Senior Citizens Grant provides a predictable monthly transfer to older people aged 80 years and above nationally, with a reduced eligibility age of 60 or 65 and above in some districts in Uganda, predominantly in Karamoja. It reaches around, currently the estimate is that it reaches around 370,000 older people. And it provides a transfer of 25,000 Ugandan shillings, which is equivalent to around $7 per month, at a level of investment of 0.08% of GDP. And studies have shown that among children aged, the youngest children aged 0 to 5 years, this has had a positive impact on their food security, increasing the number of meals by 11%. older people have been shown to spend much of their pension on education, on the education of their grandchildren. The proportion of children of schooling age between the age of 6 to 18 years who never attended school, so who were completely deprived of schooling, has significantly reduced due to receiving the Senior Citizens Grant by an estimated 17%, according to one quantitative evaluation conducted based on the Senior Citizens Grant. The proportion of children of the same age group that is currently attending attending primary school increased from 68 to 71%, which is quite a significant increase of 3 percentage points. And the program has also been found to reduce child labor by 5 percentage points. And I wanted to also show some of the evidence available from labor-intensive public works schemes based on the evaluation of NUSAF 3, the other main mainstream social protection program that is existing in Uganda. The evaluation indicated that expenditure on school fees increased, which also indicates a positive increase in school enrollment of children. Children were also found to increase the frequency in which they consumed meals. However, the dietary diversity was not improved as a result of receiving income from NUSAF 3. Households who were considered poor reduced by more than half, but a considerable proportion of NUSAF 3 recipients still remained very poor, owning no assets, which really showed the deprivations that are experienced already by households participating in the NUSAF 3 program. Over half of NUSAF 3 participants are women, which at first does seem like quite a positive phenomenon that women are engaging in public works. However, this does really call for a closer look at what sort of impacts this could have on participation in public works could have on women, and also women who have a role as a caregiver and are caring for children. As currently no measures are at the moment taken into account to account for unintended negative impacts on the labor-intensive public works programs for children. So this really does emphasize that in future it is a priority to monitor more closely child welfare indicators and women as well as potentially children participating in public works schemes. When we consider evidence globally, for instance, from Ethiopia's Productive Safety Net program, the scheme did result in an increase in child labor when parents were unable to participate in work and children participated in the program instead to act as a proxy. And global evidence from various countries that have implemented public works schemes across sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia show that labor-intensive public works schemes are also quite often associated with undernutrition of children. And this could, for instance, result from adverse impacts on childcare. Parents and caregivers having to participate in public works programs and therefore having to make choices that negatively impact the well-being of children. Whereas NUSAF 3 provides an income transfer based on a daily wage and therefore aims to remunerate participants based on their work participation. It should also be when looking at public works programs, it should be considered that the programs have an opportunity cost. So the program's appraisal document of the World Bank indicated that at the onset of NISAF 3, it was estimated to have an opportunity cost of around 88,000 shillings over the lifetime of the scheme, which is around 41% of the transfer provided to a family each year, which is equivalent to the income that families would technically forego by not participating in other labor market activities. So to summarize a few recommendations based on impact and adequacy, the Senior Citizens Grant as a unconditional, monthly, predictable transfer really highlights the potential to increase impacts for children when families can access predictable transfers. And this really highlights the potential to immediately leverage the positive impacts of the Senior Citizens Grant and continue its expansion by reducing the eligibility age. While the child-sensitive social protection programs in the West Nile and the Girls Empowering Girls social protection programs are currently still limited in size, they provide potential lessons and important evidence to assess the potential for scaling this up into a more national program provided for children based on the evidence that's generated of these two schemes. And the third recommendation would be specifically on the labor-intensive public works programs, that it is important in the future to consider the well-being of children by monitoring specifically child welfare indicators, and which should inform measures that prevent any unintended negative impacts on children. This could, for example, be introducing more flexible hours for women or providing childcare arrangements and ultimately preventing child labor as well. In terms of appropriateness, this really looks at the conceptualizing child-sensitive social protection and its importance in achieving other goals and national aims. Child-sensitive social protection should really be at the focus of human capital development in Uganda. And I was really happy to also hear these words confirmed by the ministry already, that it is really an essential part of building the future skilled workforce in Uganda. As this graph shows, it illustrates graphically when we start investing in social protection from a life cycle lens. This can generate more human capital development by benefiting the health and skills of the population and the workforce, increasing their dignity as well as their active participation in society. And this also benefits investments in other sectors of the economy and public sectors in Uganda, including healthcare, education, more skilled work in infrastructure, as well as social services and agriculture, which ultimately benefits a more sustainable economic growth that is more inclusive of the participants of its citizens. And the long-term social protection strategy that is being developed by the Ministry of Gender, it really forms an essential window of opportunity to prioritize child-sensitive programming and unlock the potential of human capital development for more inclusive and sustainable growth. And there has been already quite a lot of evidence around these impacts that go beyond the individual and the household level and cascade further into communities and national societies and economies. In Uganda, one macroeconomic study indicates that investments in social protection by enhancing human capital are found to have comparable impacts to investments in other public sectors that seem to be more productive
to stimulate the economy, such as infrastructure. So really, it should not be a zero-sum choice of investing in economic production or in the social dimensions of society. Social protection really does underpin economic growth as well. And this just shows some evidence from a global study across low and middle income countries in Africa, which shows that social protection stimulates local economies by generating a multiplier effect. When cash is put into the local economy and received by beneficiaries, they increase their consumption by buying more goods and services that stimulate local production. And this can also benefit financial services in more remote communities when people have more access to cash and income. And it also can promote more dignity and inclusion in the local community as people have more income to share with their kin, with their households, also with their neighbors. And this diagram shows these impacts on the local economy multiplier effects of social transfers across a range of African countries, which range from, so this shows that for each dollar invested, this can have a multiplier effect ranging between $1.3 to $2.5. Looking at rights and dignity considerations, we base this on global knowledge and frameworks that have set out the rights of children to social security, which are quite comprehensive and globally set out in the firstly in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also in the United Nations in the United Nations Rights Charters as well. The Article 26 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child indicates that every child has the right to benefit from social security, including social insurance, and that state parties shall take the necessary measures to achieve the full realization of this right in accordance with their national law. And Article 27 also refers to a standard of living that should be adequate for the child's physical, mental, spiritual, moral, and social development. And the rights of children are also set out in the African Charter on the Rights of the Child, that state parties shall ensure to the extent possible the survival, protection, and development of the child. And this more refers to the design of social protection schemes. How can we best design social protection schemes that they do adhere to these rights? Universal schemes that provide children equally, without discrimination, with an equal start in life are the most rights-based in their design. Whereas a benefit to all children nationally can have significant fiscal implications. To manage the fiscal space, one option that could be considered is to grow a scheme for all children incrementally by growing the age of eligibility over time. And I will get back to this a little bit later in terms of what this would look like in Uganda. Another consideration that is very relevant in Uganda is also the implications of the rights for refugees. A large proportion of overall children who face deprivations and who are living in poverty in Uganda include many refugees that are hosted by Ugandan communities. And so that is also one question to consider for social protection in Uganda. What does that mean in terms of entitlements for refugees to adequate minimum income protection? In terms of governance and the institutional capacity of the social protection system, it should be emphasized that in order to form a sustainable foundation for social protection schemes to grow, it is important that they are government-owned and managed and financed through recurring government revenues over time as well. As this really increases the predictability and the reliability and sustainability of schemes in the future. And so this really calls on to build on the coordination efforts of partner agencies who are at the moment providing essential support to the Government of Uganda in the implementation of child-focused social protection pilots to strengthen the more child-sensitive expansion of the national social protection system over time as well. To emphasize a number of important milestones for the institutional capacity of Uganda. Uganda is really growing its nationally owned system, and the Senior Citizens Grant, for example, has really been a huge achievement to this effort. The launch of the single registry in this year also represents a very important milestone to strengthen system coordination and monitoring evaluation of schemes. This could also facilitate better integration with other systems, and in the future it could also facilitate more scalability of social protection schemes when these are when information systems are managed by linking this with other systems that analyze risks, including early warning systems and the disaster risk reduction strategies to enable shock response when these are appropriately linked to the mechanisms that trigger shocks and emergency responses. Uganda currently invests around 0.5% on social protection. While there are different measures of social protection investment in Uganda, what we have now considered here is really predominantly social security, including the civil service pension. When we look only at direct income support, this is substantially lower at 0.09% of GDP at the moment, which is relatively low by international standards and regional standards as well, as it's currently below levels of investments in Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda that invests at least 1%, or it's around 3 to 4% in Kenya at the moment, in terms of GDP percentage in core tax finance social protection schemes. So this means that around 0.4% of GDP of the overall investment figure here includes the civil service pension scheme. So in summary, government spending on social protection is extremely low in international comparison. And when we compare this to the overview of inclusiveness in terms of how many children are reached indirectly or directly by the social protection system, the investment in social protection for children is currently minimal. If coverage were to increase gradually, the expansion of social protection schemes across the life cycle would be feasible without significantly reducing growth in spending in other sectors. And this has been, there have been estimations done in Uganda to set out the projections of a future life cycle social protection system in the vision for social security. for which I will show a couple of recommendations later. And so to increase financial fiscal sustainability, what will be important is for the long-term social protection strategy to set out financial targets, and also for these financial targets to be quite ambitious, whereas they should be fiscally realistic. It should put an emphasis on growing the system over time and emphasizing coverage of children within the system. COVID-19, despite its challenges and its negative impacts on society and the economy, it also presents a key opportunity to present an investment case for social protection to promote more long-term sustainable economic recovery over time. Coherence and integration looked at the situation of the social protection system within the context of other key services that aim to achieve positive outcomes for children. And this also looks more at the social protection system as a whole, including the essential pillar of social care and support services. And whereas we did not analyze this in detail due to the nature of the study being predominantly desk-based, the social care and support services pillar is currently also undergoing quite important developments, as a vision for social care is currently being set out by the Government of Uganda, and therefore the government is really stepping up its coordination of the social care sector. Looking at past studies that have been conducted based on the sector, it does show that to this day, social care and support services, especially those focused on children, are implemented in quite a fragmented manner and rely still quite often on community-based services. And what is quite alarming is that these have been, local level services have been deprioritized over time. One study by USAID showed that operational funds for community level staff had declined by 80% between 2007 up to 2019. In terms of integration, social protection is increasingly being integrated with nutrition objectives. This can be particularly seen in Save the Children and WFP support to the government in Cash Plus implementation and child-sensitive social protection schemes, as well as the maternal and child health nutrition program and voucher programming, which really emphasize access to nutrition and healthy food items and good diets for children, as well as income support. To show a number of recommendations, what is really important for as the Government of Uganda is defining and coordinating the social care sector, is to define more clearly the caseload of the social care and support sector, as well as the human resource requirements to build the sector over time. There's also potential to build on existing strengthening parenting initiatives that empower families to also meet their care responsibilities. And however, what should also be emphasized, as I will show quite shortly, is coverage of direct income support schemes for households to establish a minimum income should be a priority, as equally as providing public services is the ability of households to afford basic needs and access to services. And this is shown in this diagram, which shows this integrated approach to social protection with other public services to achieve good health, nutrition, and education outcomes among children. While education and health are very important and core public services. They need to work together with social protection, as those alone will not be enough to get children into school and get hospitals and health clinics attended by families with children. As social protection, with social security and social services at its core, is really important to address that aspect of affordability and empowerment. And as I mentioned a bit earlier, the vision for social security has already set out in detail the proposals for what a life cycle social protection system would look like. And so we've included a number of recommendations to draw on the vision for social security, starting with direct income support programs. Firstly, this would be to lower the eligibility age for the senior citizens grant to 70 years as a more immediate policy, and over time also to 65 years by 2023. Which would significantly expand the coverage, the indirect coverage of children, as well as providing obviously essential income support to older people. Children with disabilities are also very important to not leave the most vulnerable children in Uganda behind. And so our recommendations included the introduction of a child disability benefit, also immediately, as this would also be achievable at a relatively low fiscal cost of 0.1% of GDP, starting off with a transfer of 40,000 Ugandan shillings per month. And eventually also building on the achievements of the child-sensitive social protection pilot in the West Nile, which provides a predictable nutrition-sensitive transfer, and to start building the evidence and the foundations for a national child benefit. And this could be incrementally introduced over time. So for example, starting in 2023, if Uganda were to implement a child benefit incrementally, this could start with children below the age of 3 years, children aged 0 to 2, and by not taking children off of the scheme until their 18th birthday, the scheme could grow incrementally into a universal scheme by the fiscal year of 2038 to 2039. So what that means essentially is that the children who are receiving a child benefit in its first year of implementation will continue to receive the child benefit until they reach adulthood, whereas only new children born into the scheme are then automatically start receiving a child benefit and will continue to receive it as they grow up into adulthood. In terms of the required level of investment, which has also already been projected by the Vision for Social Security, the cost of a child disability benefit would remain consistently quite low, especially in comparison to any of the other schemes. So this would start at 0.1% of GDP in the first year of implementation, but it would not grow significantly over time. The cost of the child benefit would increase incrementally as more children are born into the scheme over time. And this rises to around 1% of GDP by 2030 to 2031. But it starts at around 0.05% of GDP. So in its first year, the cost would really be very manageable. The Vision for Social Security obviously looked at a more overall package of life cycle income support schemes over time as well. And this would really ideally be an even more child-sensitive system. A complete life cycle system that has been set out in the vision would reach a cost of around or almost 1.5% of GDP by 2030 to 2031. And this would include child benefits, disability benefits for both children and adults, a reduced age of the senior citizens grant to 65 years nationally, and as well as public employment schemes. And when we look at the overall package of life cycle schemes, this would have significant impacts on poverty, especially for children and older people. So what this graph shows, the gray area is the poverty rate after transfers have been received. And the top of the blue area is the current poverty rates across age groups in Uganda, or well, at least the situation that was last measured by household survey data prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's estimated that the national poverty rate would reduce overall from 21.4% to 16.2%. And this is estimated if all of these programs are fully rolled out by 2030 to 2031. And to illustrate the impacts on children, the rate of poverty would decline by 6.3 percentage points for children, for the youngest children, aged 0 to 4 years. So I'd like to finish off this section with some concluding remarks. So first, I'd like to start off with congratulating the government of Uganda in really building its national capacity and ownership of the social protection sector. And government of Uganda has really made significant achievements over the past decade. To name a few, social protection is recognized now as key to underpin human capital development promotion and ultimately economic growth as part of the National Development Plan. A long-term social protection strategy is under development, which really shows that the government is taking on the coordination to achieve clear targets and goals for social protection for the years to come. A vision for social security is already in place as the recommendations that we have provided also draw from the proposals that have already been put in place. And a vision for social care and support services is currently being endorsed as well. As well as the single registry MIS, which has been launched, which forms also a significant achievement in terms of the institutional coordination and monitoring of the social protection system. So building on this achievement, now is really the time to invest in child-sensitive social protection in Uganda. Starting with the expansion of direct income support, Uganda can prioritize coverage of minimum income support schemes reaching children and break the vicious cycle of intergenerational poverty to leverage the potential of the demographic dividends and human capital development in Uganda. And to summarize the overall recommendations that we've provided throughout the report, Firstly, is to support all efforts to gradually lower the age of the senior citizens grant to 70 years and subsequently to 65 by 2023. To build on the child-sensitive social protection pilot and the Girls Empowering Girls social protection scheme in Kampala to inform the incremental growth of a child benefit. To look at closely at labor-intensive public work schemes in Uganda to minimize any unintended harms for children, and to also monitor these impacts based on child welfare indicators over time. To prioritize a child disability benefit to cover the most vulnerable children and also address the additional costs that these households face to achieve, to cover their basic needs, and the incremental growth of a child benefit subsequently, in both in the long-term social protection strategy. And building on direct income support to also, in forward-looking, focus on the gradual implementation of multi-tiered social security. And by this we mean linking direct income support also to contributory systems of support to cover families in the informal workforce, and to potentially expand social security schemes for those, access to social security schemes for more workers outside of the civil service pension and the limited sectors of formal employment that are currently accessing those schemes. And to underpin these ambitions by establishing clear targets for a credible government-led financing strategy for social protection that is fiscally manageable, but nonetheless should still maintain its ambition to grow the sector and grow its schemes over time. And essential is also to strengthen the social care and support system, which is already being taken up by the Government of Uganda under leadership of the Ministry of Gender. And this is essential to include child social services. So I just quickly wanted to check how we are on time, and if I have a couple of examples from the region and some lessons that I could share, but if we are short on time, I can also stop here. David, can I ask for your recommendation?
Yes, please go ahead, Anne, but very quickly.
Okay, thank you. So I'll briefly show a couple of examples of what other countries in the regions have done in terms of child-focused programming. And this really illustrates that it is certainly fiscally attainable if priorities are set to start investing in children. So child-focused programs have been developed or piloted in Mozambique, Angola, Kenya, Namibia, and South Africa. I won't go into too much detail into all of these schemes, but I will show an example of Kenya, which currently has a poverty-targeted program for orphans and vulnerable children, but is now planning a universal child benefit to be incrementally grown over time. So to quickly illustrate as well, when we think of fiscal space, which is obviously a challenge, we also need to consider the global discourse around affordability of social protection, and this narrative that we often hear as well, that social protection, and in particular universal social protection, is only for rich countries. But when we look at how rich these countries actually were when they started introducing universal child benefits across Northern Europe, as well as South Africa and Mongolia, who have inclusive child benefits, the levels of income were actually quite similar to the levels of income of middle-income countries currently. So, for example, South Africa is currently actually wealthier than these countries were when they started introducing UCBs. And Namibia is also among the higher end of the comparison of welfare. And Angola as well. And while Kenya and Uganda are still among the lower end of the level of wealth that is in comparison to those countries that have implemented child-focused schemes, it is certainly, when we look at the example of Kenya, fiscally achievable when we when the children are prioritized, especially in a relative sense when we look at the proportion of investment in social protection across high-income countries. This averages at around 15% of GDP. So it's quite a significant proportion of core public investment that goes into social protection. So to briefly look into Kenya's universal child benefits, Kenya is currently planning to expand its current poverty target scheme to a universal child benefit by incrementally increasing the age of eligibility of the child benefit, starting with a universal benefit for children aged 0 to 9 years, but then also to manage fiscal costs, to prioritize certain counties according to stunting rates of children, and to expand the number of counties to deliver full coverage by 2030. So what this really shows is that, similar actually to how the Senior Citizens Grant has been implemented in Uganda, it is possible to incrementally grow also a child-focused scheme over time. So in Kenya, starting off this next year, Kenya aims to reach all children aged 0 to 9 years, starting off with 9 countries that show the highest stunting rates. This grows to 14 countries and reaches all children aged 0 to 10 years by 2023, when new children are born into the scheme, but the existing recipients are not taken off. And in the future, the number of counties grows over time as the number of children also increases incrementally as children are born into the scheme, and eventually reaching universal coverage by 2030. And so Kenya aims to achieve this gradual rollout over time at a cost starting off with 0.16% of GDP in 2022. However, the initial cost actually falls from, which was initially 0.6%, has fallen to 0.16% by taking this more gradual incremental approach. And it peaks at 1.05% in 2030 when the scheme is universal. And this maximum cost is actually still below other countries in comparison that have achieved inclusive child benefits, including Mongolia and South Africa. And what is important to note as well is that the costs actually reduce over time, as based on population projections, including in Kenya, but also as well what we similarly see in Uganda. Over time, fertility rates are set to decline, and the costs of running the program are also become more efficient and more manageable when the program has achieved its goal of universality. Thank you very much. I will stop here. And I'll stop sharing my screen for now. I'm sure that some questions may have been raised, but...
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Anne a very big and warm round of applause. Thank you so much, Anne, for a very elaborate presentation of the situation of social protection in Uganda and how it's delivers on impacts for children. I think for me the key message here was that we could actually become more child sensitive with our programming, because by spending a maximum of 1% of GDP, we can actually cover all Uganda's children by 2030. So that's a very strong message. So thank you very much, Anne. Thank you very much for a wonderful report. And with that, I would like to take the honor to invite Mr. Agri Chibenge, the Permanent Secretary, to invite our Honorable Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, who joined us during Anne's presentation. We will have a Q&A session after the minister's speech and launch of the report. So please hold on to those comments, type them in the chat so that we can prepare to answer them. But for now, Agri, please come and do the honors. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Betty Amongi Ongom, the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development, the Honourable Members of Parliament, I'm told in the process I made my presentation earlier, and the Honourable Kabahenda Flavia Rabuhoro, who is the chairperson of the Committee of Parliament on Gender, Labour and Social Development, joined us, and your other colleagues, the members of Parliament here present, the country representative of Save the Children, Dragana Strinich, I hope I pronounce it well, the country director, Save the Children. Honourable Minister, there are colleagues here from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and other key partners. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to join me in welcoming the Honourable Minister, who is here to address us and also launch the report on child-sensitive social protection in Uganda, an analysis of direct income support. Honourable Minister, the launch of this report is another important milestone in our celebrations of the World Children's Day, which falls on Saturday, tomorrow, the 20th of November. I am aware that yesterday you also launched another report on ending violence against children, while at this very point in time, your colleague, the Honourable Minister of State in charge of Children and Youth Affairs, Honourable Mateke, Sarah Mateke Nyirabasisi, is at Next Media, also marking a commemoration event of the World Children's Day. So your presence here underscores the importance of this event and the celebrations that this event contributes to of the World Children's Day. So, Honourable Minister, we are honored to have you here, and I would like to invite you to talk to the people here and the country at large. Join me to welcome the Honourable Minister, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Let me start by recognizing my colleagues, members of Parliament, and my chairperson for the Committee on Gender with the team. If you could stand up and see the members of Parliament. Some are that side, some are here. Thank you very much, honorable members of Parliament, for coming. There are many. Some are committee members, some are members of the Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. It's a very vibrant parliamentary forum with many active people. So we want to thank them. And the PS and the team from the ministry and all of you in your various capacities. I want to say the team from the ministry ambushed me. Let me make it clear. The PS and the commissioner is here looking very innocent. Because I should have been with the women parliamentarians this morning. Then I was hijacked to come here. So if the women parliamentarians are annoyed, I will tell them who they should direct their angers. But still, I'm happy that I'm here as a member of parliament, as a minister, but most importantly as a mother of children. And for those who are not mothers or parents or fathers, it is one of the most important functions in life. There is nothing as more fulfilling as being a parent. And so when we talk about these issues, we are talking about issues that are the first priority in life for everybody. And as government official, we should put all our efforts to secure our children. I'm delighted to participate with you together in the launch of the report on child-sensitive social protection in Uganda, because social protection is an important part of our national development strategy for inclusive and equitable growth. As outlined in our National Development Plan, social protection is critical in enhancing Ugandans' human capital and unlocking the potential of our youthful population to accelerate and sustain the socio-economic transformation which is anticipated in the Uganda Vision 2040. We recognize social protection as an important component in Ugandan's toolkit to reap a demographic dividend from our youthful population. When I was looking at the statistics, the number of youth below 18 years is now surpassing half of the total population of Uganda. So we therefore appreciate all the partners, especially Save the Children, in the analysis today, which we are going to launch, which is reflecting the social protection system with a child-sensitive lens, and will use the recommendations and outcomes to shape the agenda for our children. Under the leadership of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and with support from our development partners, Uganda has been working to evolve a national social protection system for over 10 years. In 2015, the government approved the National Social Protection Policy, which defines the strategic direction for national social protection system. Based on that policy, government with support from the development partners is implementing a number of flagship programs, including senior citizens grants, special grants for disability, NUSAF 3, and others. These programs are making significant contribution towards poverty and vulnerability reduction, as well as creating resilience among the population to the life cycle risks and shocks. For this, I want to thank our development partners, including the World Bank, we have the Irish Aid, the FCDO, CIDA, EU, UN agencies, notably UNICEF, UN Women, ILO, UNDP, UNFPA, World Food Programme, and many others. The above notwithstanding, however, social protection coverage in the country is still very low. Data is showing that social protection still remains at only 5% in the country, which is very, very low. compared to the number of vulnerability and those who are vulnerable. We are committed as government to gradually increase allocation of resources to social protection programs. Currently, the Ministry of Gender is working, and we have finalized already a paper which we are to take to Cabinet and to Parliament to lower the age of the current SAGE beneficiary. The only thing we are still battling with is lower to what age, because financial analysis is showing that if we are to undertake gradual lowering, probably we'll start by lowering to 75, then 70, and eventually reach the target of 65. So that paper is about to go to Parliament. We are also spearheading reforms in public service pension scheme and National Social Security Fund with a view to expanding coverage and benefits and expanding subscribers. And this one I want to thank the Chair of Gender and the team of Social Protection Committee and the Ministry of Gender and workers' representative that stood so firm to say we must protect social security function of the ministry. And with that, the President has now authorized that we proceed with making sure that the NSSF function of social security remains with the Ministry of Gender. So I want to thank Chair and the team and the members who have been very strong on this matter. These are initiatives which represent important steps towards building inclusive national social security system in the country in line with our policy and Vision 2040. And as I stated before, Uganda, with its very young population, presents us with a challenge and opportunity. A challenge in terms of the burden of care to the families and government, and an opportunity in terms of the potential demographic dividends, which does not just happen, but must be planned for. The experience of COVID-19 for the past 20 months has demonstrated that most people across the country live on insecure income and are vulnerable to falling into poverty at the slightest moment of shock. If you saw when we opened the COVID-19 cash, which government approved under the Ministry of Gender, the number of people who registered to get support through that social program, which was mitigating COVID-19, was enormous. But the money which was available was little. So that showed us that there is need to cascade social protection initiative, because many poor households are still unable to meet the basic needs in terms of food and nutrition, health care, education, and others. Therefore, being a country that is still prone to natural shock, it is important that we deliberately invest in strengthening our social protection system that will respond and mitigate the effects of the shock. It is important that we look at areas of shelter, areas of children's homes, areas of medical care for the children, areas of justice. Many times when we are in cabinet or in parliament, people are asking, why do you still leave children on the street? We must not look at why do you leave children on the street. We must ask ourselves, what drives the children to come to the street? That is the fundamental question. And if they had the social network that would be able to support them, I do not think they will end up on the street. And those who commit crimes, in many circumstances, the reforms are capable of reintegrating them back into the society. So I know we will continue to work together, because this intervention will form an integral part of our agenda as it is already part of the Human Capital Development Program and our third National Development Plan, with a specific objective of reducing vulnerability and gender inequality along the life cycle. As I conclude, I want to thank Save the Children for organizing this interaction, and us, together with my members of parliament, we as representatives of people, we need to get interested in programs that will promote resilience of the people throughout their life cycle. I'm also aware that Parliament had passed the health insurance bill. It went to His Excellency the President. He has requested that Ministry of Health should come back and undertake further consultations with the private companies who are objective to some of the provision for compelling them to contribute to social insurance, medical insurance for their workers. So this bill is back for consultation. The Ministry of Gender is working with the Ministry of Health to ensure that the bill is concluded, and I call upon my colleagues, members of Parliament, that let us work together to make sure that that part of one of the most crucial laws for social protection is passed. And I would like to reiterate my appreciation to all of you for supporting our efforts on building a robust social protection system. Let us join efforts to advance social protection so as to build Ugandan's human capital. With that, I want to thank you. And now, I don't know how we are going to launch your report, so that I request the people joining me, including the chair of the committee.
It's fine. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the pleasure to invite the Honorable Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development to officially launch this report by appending her signature, and all the dignitaries that are accompanying her will also append her signature. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the Honorable Minister. Thank you very much for launching this very beautiful and very important child-sensitive social protection in Uganda report. Thank you very much. We've got sanitizer here. Please sanitize your hands after you've touched this. It's a wonderful photo moment, so please take your time, make sure your signature is legible, because we're going to keep this for posterity. In 2030, we want to see if the recommendations in this report will have been successfully implemented. So this is a very important milestone. And I would like to thank the Honorable Minister and fellow colleagues, the members of Parliament, because where social protection in Uganda is your effort. We know how hard you've fought to make this progress, so we really are proud of the achievements you've got Uganda to achieve. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're online, I hope you can see this. It's a very beautiful report, and of course, we shall share it. We've got a few printed copies inside here. Congratulations, Save the Children Uganda. Congratulations, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, for this joint analysis of the child sensitivity of our social protection system. Please sign, it's fine. Thank you very much. Please give her a round of applause. Thank you very much and congratulations once again. Can we have a group picture with you, Honorable Minister? If you just stand here, we'll have this beautiful background. Honorable members of Parliament, please come back. Let's have a group photograph. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, so please follow me this way. We've got steps that we can use. It's an absolutely wonderful moment. It's great to witness this, because in 2010, I joined ESP and nobody would have imagined that we'll be talking about a universal child grant. And we've achieved the senior citizens grant across the entire country. A child grant is clearly in sight. What a wonderful day it is today. Please give them a round of applause. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much. Save the Children. Thank you very much, members of Parliament. Thank you. Let's have better smiles. There's a lot to celebrate. If you want to put your hands up and say hooray, please do that. Yes, congratulations. Thank you. Yes, we're doing. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. We really don't take this for granted. Please take your seats. We are going into the next session, which is a panel discussion. Our panelists are already in the house, but I think it would be nice to take a break, because a lot of us have already been here for quite a while. So it would be nice if we take a very short health break of 5 minutes, so that we can come back here. Maybe we should do this by show of hands. Please, if you would like to take a 5-minute break, can you put up your hand? And if not, then we can actually proceed with the event. The media, we hope you are alert, because I won't be giving you that sound bite. So it seems everybody wants to continue. So if you want to take a break, please feel free to move and freshen up. But for now, I will ask our panelists, assuming they're all ready, to step up on the podium as the PS and colleagues say bye to the Honorable Minister. And may I ask that Dr. Ibrahim Kasirye from Economic Policy Research Center steps up onto the podium. Dr. Patrick Twesije from the National Planning Authority. Mr. Fred Ngavirano must have escorted the Honorable Minister, but I'm sure he will be here shortly. Mr. Patrick Chichonjo Katabazi from the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection is here. And so while Fred prepares to come, we would like to start with the first session of the panel. And that session will be led by Dr. Ibrahim Kasirye. Ibrahim Kasirye is the Director of Research at the Economic Policy Research Center in Makerere. His name and face are not unfamiliar to most of the people in this room. He's the number cruncher at the Economic Policy Research Center. All the poverty numbers, all the vulnerability numbers you've seen, he's the guy that spends the nights crunching them for the last several years that I know him. So you are welcome, Ibrahim. And Ibrahim is going to discuss for us the state of child poverty in Uganda. So Anne Tran did explain to us the state of vulnerability of Ugandan children, but Ibrahim is here really to tell us what's behind those numbers. So I will not waste any of my time, Ibrahim, so please switch on that microphone and talk freely so that you can tell us what's driving child poverty in Uganda. What can we do to stop that intergenerational transfer of child poverty? Over to you, Ibrahim.
Thank you very much. Please allow me to take off my mask so that I do this much more clearly. The Honorable Minister, who fortunately or unfortunately has left us, the members of Parliament, both from the Gender Committee as well as the Social Protection Committee, the Permanent Secretary to the Ministry of Labour and Social Development, the Country Program Manager for Save the Children's Fund, all protocols observed, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, David, for the opportunity to discuss some of the latest numbers regarding child poverty in this country. As has been mentioned by several presenters this morning, this is a very important aspect in Uganda, and we are also at an important milestone whereby we are in the process of getting another national grant similar to the old age grant. So why is child poverty important in this country? Several speakers this morning have mentioned there are so many children. Based on the most recent National Household Survey released by the Bureau of Statistics a few months ago, the children account for 54% of the total population in this country. Hence, more than 1 out of every 2 Ugandans is a child, but most importantly, they are dependent. It's projected that this number will go down by the time we get to 2030 due to projected changes in the demographic shift. So there are currently around 22 million children, and it's expected by around 2030 it would have increased to around 26 million, but the share would be around 47%. Why is child poverty important? Partly because a significant share of the child poverty is transmitted through generations. There is a lot of intergenerational transmission of poverty, in as far as a poor mother is more likely to produce or end up with a teenage mother and then another poor child and the like. So it's important. Then children experience poverty in a different way from what adults do, as I'll show in the slides to come. In terms of the most recent numbers, based on the 2019-2020 Uganda National Household Survey that was released a few months ago, it was indicated that the share of children living in poverty is around 5 percentage points higher than than the adults. Hence, they contribute a relatively higher share of those living in poverty. despite their population also being quite high. That has several implications. They are deprived in several ways, from the education mentioned, from the health, to issues of child protection that have increased quite tremendously during the COVID period. Children are deprived in several ways, and many of them are deprived in multiple. So it's not that they lack health or they have poor nutrition. It's a combination of poor nutrition, facing a very dangerous environment, and probably there's very poor sanitation and other wash facilities. Hence, the proposed child benefit grant is a very good step forward, given the fact that by addressing one dimension, for example, education, you're unlikely to have an effective method of dealing with child poverty in this country, given the multidimensional way children face. Most at the same time, depending on their demographic status, the infants face different challenges, notably nutrition. Those aged 6 to 17 years also face different challenges that can range from education to wash and the like. From the geographical distribution, most of the poor children are in northern Uganda, although it's worth noting that the level of deprivation has gone down quite significantly over the past 10 or so years, as the country made significant strides in improving education attendance and the like. As has been indicated, most of these poor children are in rural areas, and in most cases, the rural areas in north and eastern Uganda. What does it mean to be child poor in this country? Based on research done at EPRC in collaboration with UNICEF a few years ago, we went out to find what does it mean to be poor. So this particular chart tries to look at different areas of Uganda, from Bundibujo, Karamoja, Mayuge, Kampala, and Kitgum. So all those different colors represent those regions. And in different areas, the challenges of child poverty, based on the voices of the children themselves, are different. It could range from alcoholism of the parents, which ends up creating challenges of child protection. It could range also to issues of not having food, where people are going on one or even less frequent meals in a day. Then challenges could also go to as far as lacking the necessary or the minimum level of land required to be able to provide food for sustenance. So child poverty means different things to different children in Uganda, depending on their status. In quite a number of the issues regarding child protection, they could emanate from the fact that the parents have divorced or separated, and there are new marital unions that increase the rates of child abuse. So all those challenges lead to significant dispenses in different ways in this country. In the recent past, there's been a concerted effort to place significant attention on issues regarding child protection. The Honorable Minister mentioned that a few months ago, as the country attempted to provide a grant to the vulnerable poor, there was a crash in terms of the registration. So having an authentic database of not only children, because in that case it was not children, but it was adults, but were faced with the challenge of not having an adequate database, so they had to do the registration. But there's been significant efforts invested in child protection notably in doing birth registration to ensure that most of the children are registered, addressing issues of teenage pregnancy and early marriages, which have increased quite tremendously because of COVID, but prior to COVID, there were efforts by the Ministry of Education to address this. Then finally, also there have been previous aspects to deal with orphan status, of a key issue in terms of the vulnerability of these children.
Can I interrupt you, Ibrahim, because I'm very curious. You look at the numbers almost every day. What are the chances that a child born in a poor family will be poor as an adult? Do you have any idea for Uganda?
I do not have the off-the-cuff figures for that, but I would say the chances are more than 50%, especially if they fail to get the main ingredient that has been pushing people out of poverty, that's education. So if they are unable to stay in school beyond, and this is not only primary, because the challenges you face continue if you only attain primary. If they are unable to stay in school, the chances of being poor are quite very high. In terms of what needs to be done, it's good that we've made steps in the right direction in terms of establishing an alternative grant to the one of old age, one that is focusing on children. And it's also good that it's focusing on not only a specific set of children, although the presenter from Development Pathways mentioned that children with disabilities face a more challenging environment compared to your regular children. So that's a very important step in as far as trying to establish a national grant that has a national coverage, and not only for only some children. But also the other issue, as I hand over the mic, would be to invest more in data systems, because the Honorable Minister mentioned because of COVID, it was announced that they were going to give grants to vulnerable people. It took like a whole month to establish this list. In other countries, notably South Africa, which has been giving out significant shares of these grants, they were able to take off within less than a week to provide the announced grants. So without this kind of data systems, it is possible that Parliament could approve a child grant, and then would run back to establish who is a child and who is not registered. So it's very important to establish those data systems prior for any of these interventions being made.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. Can you please give him a round of applause? My neighbor here, I didn't introduce Patrick. Sorry, I think we've lost the sound on these mics. Are you able to restore this? Okay, hello? Thank you very much. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't get a chance to properly introduce Patrick. Dr. Patrick Twesige is the manager for health and nutrition at the National Planning Authority. And I know he was very key in the design of the latest National Development Plan, in particular the Human Capital Development Program. Patrick, based on the numbers that Ibrahim has just talked about, and the fact that, the chances of a child born in poverty being poor are quite high, can you help us to understand what it really means to have a country where you've got those kinds of poverty statistics? What does this mean for Uganda's socio-economic transformation? Because also we know coverage of social protection in Uganda is less than 5%, that's what Anne said. what does this underinvestment actually mean for our economy?
Thank you very much, moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, in all your capacities, the cost of not investing in our children is really very high. Like you had said, the human capital index of Uganda is at 38%, which literally means that a child born in our country today at 18 will only be effective to 38% of their abilities. That is a big loss in terms of the country. A child born in Uganda today, by the age of 5, we have around 29% of our children stunted. And we know our diet is mainly carbohydrate. So if our children are stunted, that means the protein is worse. The protein deficiency is worse, which means brain development will also not reach the required level for them to perform effectively. So we are losing around close to 30% of our children even before they start school. So by the time we are putting money in them to start their education, around 30% of them have not achieved the required brain development that they would have attained if they had adequate nutrition, for example. And we know that brain development, around 90% of the brain is developed by the time you're 5 years. So a lot of brain activity occurs at the younger age. So that's why it's very important that we talk about these issues of our children if we are to achieve any form of socio-economic transformation based on that. The loss is very big. That is on the health aspect. Even in education, we are not yet doing enough for our preschool children. Early childhood development education is at around 15%, and yet we know that this is very critical. For every year a child spends in early childhood development before primary school, it translates into 2.5 years of extra studying. They will go further than they would have stopped 2 extra years. So that literally means that we are losing out by not having a proper framework for early childhood development, because this eventually leads to our children dropping out of school earlier. I've not also talked about the school dropout rate. In primary, it's the completion rate is at 38%, which literally means for children who start primary school, around 62% of them by P7 will have dropped out. That is a big loss. And these are children who we have no other avenues of returning back in the education system. So from Ministry of Education, when children drop out, they are handed over to Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. That is why when we are conceptualizing the Human Capital Development Program, we said the 3 main ministries that work around the development of the human capital need to work together so that the outcomes, because the desired outcome is an effective human being, who is the human capital. For development to occur, actually human capital is more important than even the oil we are thinking about, or the minerals in Karamoja, where if you invest in your human beings, they can very ably and quickly transform a country as compared to the minerals that are underground and the oil that we're looking for. So that's why for the 3rd National Development Plan, the Human Capital Development Program is one of the very most important programs that we're looking at, and that is why we had to bring the 3 big service sectors together, to work together, to be able to iron out and discuss some of these issues. When we lose 62% of our children by P7, how do we get them back? How can Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development work with Ministry of Education to design avenues of having these children back into the education system, back into the skilling system? We also realized that when we were designing the Human Capital Development Program, the biggest challenge that our human capital had is low labor productivity. A good example is like in the hotel industry. If we were to continue without interruption of COVID, there had been a trend where most hoteliers were choosing to employ our Kenyan neighbors, because it's believed work which one Kenyan person will do, you will need 3 Ugandans to do the equivalent. So the productivity of our human capital is a big challenge, and all of it is hinged around our social networks, our health, and our education system not being able to be up to speed to be able to compete with the international standard. I have a
question, because what you've said is quite curious. So children are not completing school, they are not healthy, they are stunted. You're an economist, right?
Sure.
What does that actually mean if the productivity of the future labor force is below its capacity? If children born now, by 18, they will only be at 38% of their capacity. What does that mean for Uganda's economic growth? What does that mean for our tax to GDP ratio?
In very simple terms, if we continue at this rate, that's why we were not able to achieve lower middle income status. It's because the level of the tax base is lower. The money that government injects in human capital, in educating a person, for instance, to achieve probably like 70% of their productivity, government recoups it many more times from the taxation that government can earn from taxing them if they are in formal employment, and also in terms of when they are spending, when their spending ability improves. So for government, it's actually a worthwhile investment, especially in early childhood. The returns are enormous in terms of what government will be able to achieve from this particular person.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm very conscious that we are losing out on time. We plan to stop at midday. It's now 20 past midday. I wanted, because we'll actually have a Q&A session, so we can make some other points, but I actually wanted to move on the discussion to you, Commissioner Fred Ngaverano. I know you also understand a lot of this economic stuff. As a commissioner for youth and children in this government, what exactly can we do, or what is the government doing to build this human capital that both Ibrahim and Patrick have talked about that is deficient? How can we use the social protection system to enable more children to be well nourished, to be well educated, to have good health? What's your comment on that? What's the government's position?
Thank you, Moderator Lambert. I also want to begin by stating that you ambushed me yesterday evening, the way the minister said ambushed you. But being a card all the time in regard to my work, which I've been doing for 32 years, I will share with you. And I will not go into the complicated concepts in the NDP3 and all that. I just want to use vivid examples, because I've been on the front line for 32 years. One, allow me to begin by thanking Save the Children and the authors of the report, and to say, for those who are old enough and have read widely, you are just building, or you have built, the report is really anchored on what Oxfam and the government of Uganda found out in 1998 to 2001. We did a study, Uganda Participatory Poverty Assessment, and we had 36. And all what has been aired out here by different speakers really reconcile with what we found out. I was on one of the research teams. And by then, 1998, I'm not an economist, I'm a social worker. But we had a challenge with our Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. More understanding of poverty by then was in more conventional terms, the GDP, GNP, all that. But the community voices brought exactly the issues this report brings out. I have liked the way Ibrahim has explained, children understanding of poverty. By then, they understood poverty in regard to access to education, not availability of school infrastructure, but even distance they covered. The children and the caregivers and the parents, they say that was a sign of poverty. They looked at isolation. They looked at lack of dignity. It came out clearly. They looked at participation, that not participating like in community meetings was a sign of poverty. In one of the sites in Masindi, some community household members were so poor that they could not even have, by then they had no clothes to put on in order to come and attend the village meetings. They said that was the highest level of poverty. So me, I'm very excited, and now I have where to anchor, because when you are writing a policy paper, they say latest report. So this is the latest report, a big contribution, big. You know, for us technocrats who write cabinet papers, you have made my work very easier. Because for the last 5 years, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Local Government with partners like Catholic Relief Services, we came up with 6 indicators for local government to be assessed on in regard to investing in children. And the doctor has brought it out very well. So let me get to the key examples. There is a report, a World Bank report. I think I read it in 1998, but it's the World Bank report of 1995, where they found out that investing in $1 in a child after 25 years, they found out the rate of return was over 250%. Now, and I'm very happy that the members of parliament are here, and you are saying, you as a commissioner, what can we do? We have a lot to do under our community mobilization and mindset change. The way communities, households understand poverty is not the way the policy makers and we policy implementers understand it. We have to listen to them. The child on the wire now is the parish development model. And I'm looking at the parish development model, and I want to throw it back to the National Planning Authority, the legislators here. Have we infused in indicators at household and community level to which we can tag those who are to benefit from the grant, whether the youth groups, the women groups, even the elderly, whatever title, whatever grant they will get, to make sure that they first do A, B, C, D in regard to adhering to the fulfillment of the rights of the child. So I want us to go back to our families. And why am I saying that? I'm not from a rich family. My late father was a trucker driver, an illiterate man. And I always sit my family members and I say, if my father really had a lot of interest in my education and took me to the best elementary school up to Makerere, and you would drive up to North Coast bringing me some chicken, I said, what vision did he have? You know? And now when I finished Makerere, I said the only way to transform my family was education. And I agree with the doctor. It is education that can transform.
Yeah, but
I'm coming.
Yes.
I'm coming. And for the last 25 years, I have managed to produce more than 20 graduates, both in the nucleus family, extended family, even those I'm not related with. Those I don't pay, I mobilize and get sponsors. And what have I seen? My sister and husband died. They left 5 children, but the first and second born have been able to educate the other 4, and all of them are graduates. Now they have jobs. If you look at the transformation they have brought in their family and in the community, that's where we should start. So this broadening, what is government doing? I want to say, what are we doing, we as leaders, both technocrats and policymakers, to conscientize our communities at household level to invest in fulfillment of the 4 broad rights of a child? That's the starting point. At the ministry, we worked with other MDAs. We have a national framework for integrated early child development, and I'm very happy Dr. has brought it out very well. Even when you look into our ministerial policy statement, even now as I talk, Ministry of Finance is giving some funding in terms of a small conditional grant to make sure we implement the framework. and it is in line with 0 to 8 years investment, which is clearly stipulated in the National Development Plan 3. Thirdly, the ministry is now looking at those children who fall out of cracks. What do we do with them? Some on the streets, others in the communities. Now we bring in the skilling component. And I agree with the doctor. We are working with partners, state and non-state, and we are coming up with a comprehensive program, which reflects very well in the girl-to-girl, or girl-to-girl empowerment.
Yes,
so
girls empowering girls program.
Girls empowering girls empowerment.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we are focusing on. And we have successful examples. We started a program for youth and children in 2002, and after 18 years, a longitudinal study has shown that the girls that we took for tailoring, the girls we took for bakery, they could not marry at an early age, and even now in their family, they are more productive than their counterparts who never joined the program. So we have documented evidence that rhyme with your findings and recommendations as a country. What we need is scaling up and having a more broad cadre, both political, civil, to make sure that we take these children's rights seriously, both at national and subnational level when we are prioritizing our investment priorities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please give a round of applause for to Commissioner Fred Ngaberano. I would like to move to the next and kind of like the crown of this discussion to discuss financing for social protection. And for this, I would like to hear from you, Patrick Chonjo. Patrick is the coordinator for the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. They are the guys who are responsible for the national rollout of the SAGE Senior Citizens Grant. They've mobilized cross-party support within Parliament for social protection. How have you been able to do this, Patrick? And you know, we saw in the report and recommended that we can start investing in a child disability grant and a child grant and spend up to 1% of GDP by 2030 if we want to cover all the children. In your experience working with influential political leaders, you know, what's that journey likely to look like? How easy is it going to be to build political support and commitment to finance this very important investment? Because Ibrahim has told us the chances of poor children remaining poor as adults and producing poor children are many. Patrick has shown us that our fiscal space will be compromised, the economy will not grow. What do we need to do to walk this journey sustainably with the leadership of the political leaders?
Thank you, David, for the question. Now, the story and the need for social protection across the life cycle is very clear. The picture has been well presented and painted by different presenters, and therefore my role in this panel is very simple. So, but the question is, if the story is very clear, data is very clear, where is the problem? The problem is that we are not having research feeding into policy discussions. We are not having problems that have been identified at the community level, at various levels, feeding into our planning and budgeting processes. And that's why I want to thank Save the Children for inviting the minister and officials from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development to this occasion. I also want to thank Save the Children for inviting members of Parliament to this occasion, because in my view, the discussion of transforming issues, research into policy discussion begins at this stage. Because if you do research, no matter how good it is, and it is kept somewhere in the cupboard in the office, then that means that that research ultimately does not help us as a country. So the journey of policy change begins with engagement. Engagement at a local level, district, local leaders, and then at a national level, engaging members of parliament and relevant technocrats as well. For the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection, we have been very privileged to be part of the journey of introducing, in my view, a comprehensive debate on social protection in Uganda that started in 2011 when the Government of Uganda was implementing the flagship project of SAGE. And of course, the discussion was different. Here, it's a very good discussion. People understand issues. At that time, the story, members of parliament were asking, we are going to be giving money to citizens who are otherwise able-bodied. Aren't we going to create a dependence syndrome? Are we having our priorities right? Why can't we simply put money in ads, put money in roads, put money in agriculture, so that these people can work? Otherwise, we are going to start making people lazy. I am very happy that today the discussion is different. Today the discussion is how do we invest much more into the population, boost our human capital, so that at the end of the day, we do not have development in other aspects of physical infrastructure running ahead of the development of the people. And it is quite obvious that if development in physical infrastructure is running ahead of the people, it won't be useful at all. So, working with members of parliament, through relevant committees of parliament, we are able to shape debate on what was necessary to, first of all, accept owning the social assistance grants for empowerment program. So that was achieved. The next step was, how do we then ensure that this is rolled out to the whole country? And part of the problem, of course, is a limited resource pass that then requires a number of engagements between Parliament, Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and Ministry of Finance. But we also know, all of us, that social protection in Uganda and generally globally is a political program. So if you do not have political will, most likely you won't see results. And that is possibly the experience that I can share. I know it is broad, processes have been so many, and particularly for the child grant and for other interventions targeting children, I think what we need to start seeing again is also starting to build coalitions, right from the local level, at the district leaders, having that come through the national level, engaging members of parliament, the journey that you have started today, and then start seeing how best discussions at that level can reshape the way we are designing priorities. Because, I mean, you say this is a very good program. When the medium-term expenditure framework paper comes out, they will say, you know, these are priorities, but then these are underfunded priorities. But with rigorous discussions and engagement, I can tell you, block by block, brick by brick, you will see some positive change towards allocating resources for critical programs. And I would think very, very strongly that social protection should be one of those programs that should benefit from public financing.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Please give Patrick a big round of applause. I think we've gone full circle, really, because if we have a platform like this, we probably need to have more platforms like this. This is what I'm hearing, that engage political leaders to translate this evidence into actual policy and tangible financial commitment. I would like to open the discussion now to our audience. And I think let's start with colleagues who are on Zoom. I don't know how many people are still there. Michael, the digital team, could you please show the screen on Zoom so we can get a sense who would like to speak? If you're on Zoom, please show your hand so we can give you the opportunity to come in and comment. Basically, we've opened our Q&A session right now. It would be nice, actually, if you can switch on your video, because then we actually get to see you. So Anne is still online. I'm sure there will be questions for Anne to answer. I see several colleagues online, so please, if you can, switch on your video so we can see you and be able to engage with you. But is there anybody online who would like to come in and make a comment on any of the issues that Anne raised, which we've actually kind of deepened the discussion on with our panelists? Please unmute yourself and come on board. If the online community isn't yet ready, please, you can frame your questions. Michael, do we have any question from online? Can you please read that, or take a microphone and read it for us, and then we can get whoever it's directed to answer it.
There is a question from Caroline Lacquet. She asked, with the establishment of the parish model, how can we target children comprehensively? I don't know who that is directed to. That's
probably Patrick, Fred, and I'm sure even Patrick will have a comment. I mean, everybody will have a comment, so feel free to. Is there any other question?
Yes, she asked the second question. Social protection is cross-sectoral beyond the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. How can we mainstream child-sensitive social protection beyond social development sector? I think that goes to all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much for those questions. Carol, it's good to see you. It would have been nice if we could see your face. But that's all right. So we've got two questions. Maybe we can actually take those very quickly. Feel free to unmute yourself, gentlemen. I think I should actually apologize to the women, because this is not a gender-balanced panel. But I think Anne kind of, oh, good to see you, Carol. It's really nice. If you can wave at us, if you're online, switch on your video. I see you, Sheila. I see you, Gloria. It would be nice for you guys to, because we can actually see you. Everybody in the room can see you. So, gentlemen, Carol's question about mainstreaming social protection across the entire organization and the parish development model. Who are the takers?
I possibly could. Okay, now I think we need to understand that there has been a shift from sectors to program-based approach, and the cross-sectoral issues that she talked about are well accommodated in there. If you talk about education, education is in there. Health is in there under all human capital development. So what needs to be done, in my view, is to ensure that the human capital development program works effectively, so that all these issues come through and then they get addressed by responsible ministries and stakeholders. And perhaps the other issue on the parish model, how do we target children effectively? I think the parish model, in my view, is still evolving, and the nitty-gritties of the parish model, the way it operates and how it relates, and on how it relates to the social aspects, is yet to come out very strongly. But it is something that we must put focus on, ensure that there are verifiable indicators like my colleague Fred said, to ensure that ultimately at the lowest level of planning and implementation, we can track the progress that can be registered across all other areas, including children development.
Thank you. Please, Fred.
I want to add on what Honorable my senior colleague has said, and I agree with him when he says the model implementation of modality is still evolving, but I want to use an example of the community development model, which the Ministry of Local Government spearheaded. When we are developing the manual, in the criteria for selection of beneficiaries of the grants, we embedded in issues that would directly or indirectly contribute to improvement of quality of life at household and family and the community level. For example, one was to be a member and benefit, your children must be immunized, your children must be in school, and if you are an adult and you never went to school, you had to enroll in for functional adult literacy. A community group of men, they had to give an assurance that they would contribute to improvement of safe water in the community by working what we call Burunjibwans. So we have this model, to me, at the last period of decentralization, that really can, innovatively, we can come up with some conditions that make community more passive, more active rather than remaining passive or recipient of government grants. And in that, we increase on their contribution, both in cash and in kind, as far as realization of the rights of the child is concerned. Then on how do we go, again, Honorable has talked about the program-based approach. For us now, we have a national framework, the National Child Policy, which Cabinet passed on 20th June 2020, with a 5-year implementation framework, action plan, and under each strategic objective, for example, health goes, survival stroke health is 1. We have development stroke education, 2. We have protection as 3. 4 is participation. All of those are aligned to the rights of the child, the way the presenter, the author of this report talked about, because we are also aligning ourselves to the global framework and regional frameworks. The 5th one is on capacity building, which brings out the system strengthening and also training of the social service workforce, which also again came out in the report. So you can see the linkage between the report and what already we have as a government in place. Now, we have constituted a national interministerial committee drawing more than 40 members from all kinds of ministries, Ministry of Finance, Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Ministry of Local Government, Education, mention them. Cultural leaders are on academia and all that. And why, for example, have we come with academia? And I agree with the Honorable's observation that the way to improve is translating what we are doing into action, relating theory with action. That's what Japan does. The policies there, I was there in class, the professor told us, for them, their policies are informed by the discussion, the dialogue between the policymakers, the academia, the technocrats, with the community members, to the extent, even weekends, leaders invest in going to hear what their people are talking as far as their faith needs are concerned. Yeah. So we have the framework, and what we need is to understand the way of doing things differently, leave alone how we have been working. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues in the room, please, by show of hand, if you'd like to ask Anne or any of the panelists a question. If you actually have a general comment about the report, please, by show of hand, and we'll get the microphone to you. Honorable Flavia Kabahenda. Actually, we should give a special welcome to Honorable Flavia Kabahenda Rwabhoro. She's the inaugural chairperson of the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. She birthed that idea, and she's still doing it. She's the chairperson of the Gender, Labour and Social Development Committee of Parliament.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you so much, all of you. I want to really appreciate this discussion and the organizers, Save the Children, our development partners, Development Pathways, Ministry of Gender, and everybody here, honorable members of Parliament. I have one general observation from which I want to play my appreciation. That traditionally and culturally, people used to think that when a parent achieves anything or gets anything, the children would impliedly benefit. I think when I hear this discussion, then I think we can no longer trust that when a parent gets something, therefore the child has got. Because we have started seeing that parents can even get things and they don't reach the children. We are coming up with the parish model. I don't know whether on the discussion table, the parish model was trying to integrate children into the whole parish model thing. And of course, this should have come out from the other programs that had been there before, Emioga, all those OWC and whatever. We should have got some statistics on whether the children were benefiting or not. But what I love about the direct income support for older persons is that a bigger number, past 60%, the money that the older persons get trickle down to the children. And we can only redirect the way it trickles down so that the children benefit from what exactly they should benefit from, because it should change their nutrition and not only just buy them food, but mind about their nutrition, mind about their education. We can only direct, but otherwise the older persons are very passionate about these vulnerable children they stay with. And so me, I'm glad that now the child is being discussed alone and not as tagged to their parents. But what I realize is I think we need a lot of time with the communities, making child-sensitive social protection everybody's business. And for us, that is a big elephant in the house, because as long as it is not everybody's business, we shall continue to talk to ourselves. And the National Social Protection Policy needs to be popularized so that everyone in the home, in the household, in the community, there is a neighborhood watch over this child, so that every one of us ensures that the children are in the equations whenever we have any development programs. Of course, we have been battling with parenting. I don't want to even overstate that. We have a challenge there. But I see our communities having an information challenge. We assume that when you bear a child, therefore you are a parent, and yet you need to be assisted to parent. There are these big international hospitals where when a woman delivers a baby, the following day there is someone who comes to your room and takes you through how you can nurse the baby, how you can nurture, how you can breastfeed. But I only see that in international hospitals, not our public hospitals, because our public hospitals, we bear children like buffaloes. You just throw your child there and you are, the following day they will tell you walk away because the bed must accommodate another woman. So I think we need to work with a multi-sectoral approach, that at the health centers, even the way they address the women at antenatal stage, they should be told to be sensitive about the child. Even before this child comes on earth, the child must start to be discussed right from the time of inception until they are delivered, and then we can track them along their life cycle. And so let us not assume that everybody knows. Let us know that not everyone knows. Actually, majority may not be knowing. And in terms of nutrition, I think we need now to again resurrect and promote our staple foods. You know, there are things that are simple, but we have neglected, because the whole Uganda has gone to posho, and we no longer know that there is millet. We no longer know that there are cereals, there are green foods that we used to eat, and we were eating them like there was nothing better, and yet they were more nutritious. So we need to revive the discussion on resurrecting our staple food, promoting them. If there are any inputs to give to the communities more than beans and maize, we could even give such seed or seedlings so that people recover or restore their staple foods for nutrition. And of course, the issue of synergies and linkages. In government, the sectors need to understand that each sector requires to integrate children into all their planning, their financing, their implementation, their monitoring and evaluation. Every civil society organization must know what is the other one doing, so that I can just top up and do another thing, other than finding a number of civil society organizations in regions and areas, and they are all doing almost the same thing to the same people. And yet we would list our priorities and know this organization is intervening here and we can intervene there. Shelters and all those that the minister was talking about require that we come to the table and have a common discussion, common information. Now you can imagine the statistics every time are not the same, because yesterday the population of children was 46%. Today it is 54%. So can we harmonize that information so that we are all relaying the same information, we are all working towards managing this, and then I think I'm hopeful that we shall get there.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kabahenda. Michael, do we have any other questions from Zoom?
We have people who want to speak, like Damfire has put a question.
Yes, please go ahead, unmute yourself, switch your camera on, and ask your question or your comment. And also, of course, if you have any comments for the panelists, or feel free to come in.
Yes, thank you, moderator. My name is Amone Luke Damascus from Moroto. I work with Save the Children International as meal specialist. I want to start by giving appreciation to the members of the panel for that wonderful presentation, and to all the dignitaries present are there. I just have a brief observation to make on top of what I wrote in the chat. I think there are three key areas that we need to focus on in order to make these findings on child sensitive protection yield very wonderful results. One is the issue of education for capital development, as we say earlier. Two is the issue of health. And three is the issue of agriculture. Now, when you look at education for capital development, generally, I want to admit that Uganda has one of the best policies and legal framework along. But when it comes to implementation, that is where we seem to have a big issue. I want to say, if for instance, you look at education of 1992, and we were supposed to implement this policy carefully without deviating and what. By now, we will not be talking of problem of capital development. By now, we will not be talking of problem of child poverty and so on. But you realize many good policies which are there have not been actioned. Look at the policies surrounding health and so on, and look at how our health system and education system is functioning. That one tells you that even the near visions that we are talking about 2030, the Sustainable Development Goal and education, anger and so on, even Vision 2040 will not really be realized if we continue in this trend. Look at agriculture. Agriculture is the most important economy of Uganda as a third world country. That if we strengthen agriculture, most likely this issue of child poverty and poverty as a whole would be dealt to a significant milestone. But in a way, you realize our agriculture, although government has very good policies and support toward the commercial agriculture, the thing is stagnating to be a kind of subsistence practices. So those are the areas that, in my view, I think, if we invest on adequately, then we shall achieve most of these goals. Me, I want to say, issues of information and research. We have a lot of research findings. If you march into libraries, you look into journals online and so on, there are findings which are there. Researches which are conducted internationally, globally, you read them. But the issue here is what you have been saying. Engagement for implementation of those findings is the linkage that we are really missing. Then lastly, of course, our practices also really undermine many of the efforts. I just want to give an example. When you look at
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we really run out of time. So I want you to wind down the discussion so that we can give a chance to the panelists to respond. But also, we have to close this event in the next 10 minutes.
Okay,
but thank you very much.
I will proceed so much since I'm outside time. Thank you so much. That is my submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have another question? Can you read it for us, Michael?
Yes, we have a question from Lillian Namukasa, and she's asking how it wish to let's get it clear.
Okay, so okay, go ahead, please.
How do we bridge the gap for 5% coverage to 60% projected?
Thank you. So that's a very practical implementation question for us. Probably Fred, you will want to comment on that. Do we have any other questions in the room? Yes. Can you please take the microphone at the back? Please introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Thank you, Lambert, and then the panelists. My name is Simon Bwire. I'm from Public Service of Uganda. My concern is that, yes, today we have launched this report, so what? And the commission over there, in my understanding, should have been the leader in this whole process, and of course Save the Children working under him. And it goes back to the issue of very good reports, very good data, evidence, but probably the opportunity to be owned by the real action officers is still not very well coordinated. I would expect that when we are discussing issues of children, we have the core ministries and entities of government here to be able to receive this and know which aspects can fit in their policy papers and ministry priorities. For example, I'm not sure whether there is Ministry of Health here, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, because these are very key when it comes to owning the recommendations and the findings of this report. So where is the problem? Are we not coordinating ourselves and and probably the interventions we are undertaking as government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very important question on coordination. Thank you so much, Simon. I'm not monitoring who is online, but actually a lot of colleagues from the planning department in the Ministry of Health said they were going to be on this call. I think there were other colleagues from the Ministry of Education, but I'm not sure. But the point you're making is important, that we need to join up the discussion. I think several people have commented about this. I think intersectoral coordination, I think also Honorable Flavia raised it. So for going forward, I think we need to take this report beyond the social protection subsector and join up the conversation with others. If there is no other question from there is one question from Marion. Let's have this as the last question, because I would like to invite one response if there is here, because most of these were comments, so we don't actually have to respond, so that I can invite Bev to close and in fact answer Simon's question, so what? Because I know that Save the Children is planning to do a lot of things, so Bev is probably going to confirm that. Fred is not here by accident. The PS wasn't here by accident, neither was the minister. So I think the time for action is there. So please, Marion, introduce yourself to the meeting, please.
Thank you very much, David. I'm Marion Babazi. I work with Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development as a senior policy analyst. And I wanted to thank the research team that put this together. Mine is more of a reflection question that Dr. Ibrahim Kasiria raised. Who is a child in Uganda? Who is a poor child in Uganda? Is it the child that we see on the street every day, the ones that come near the Kanda asking for food? Is it the child with disability? Is it the child in the urban center that we see hawking nowadays due to the COVID-19 pandemic economic shock? So I think for me it's very important that the next time a research is conducted, we define who is a poor child in Uganda. What are their characteristics? If we are to have a child universal grant, those children should then be reached. I would also like to suggest to add on what Mr. Chichoncho raised, the issue of I would call them the doubters, people who don't think that a child universal grant can work. I would recommend that the research team goes back to the drawing board, do for us an analysis like we did for SAGE. I participated in a design study for the cash transfers for older persons, what it would mean for the economy. I would like we conduct another similar study, that if we were to deliver a universal child grant for our children, this is what it would save the economy. I would want to attend such a meeting when we are launching a similar report next time to convince our government that actually it's possible. We need to save the future generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mario. You know, on your last point when you said it, I smiled, because I know that we've been planning to do a global report on that very topic. So clearly there is appetite for that. So thank you very much. Colleagues, do you want to make any comment on what has been said? Because if you don't, I would like to invite Bev to close the session. We are almost 1:10. So Fred, please.
Thank you very much. I want to comment on one. My senior colleagues will talk another. Honorable, the chair of the Committee of Parliament on Gender, is it on? Yeah. Made a very strong statement or a high-level observation that sometimes we think what we have given adults get to the children. I did a study about 10 years back, and I found out that households that had received cows for zero grazing in Bushenyi, even those who had their own cows, children were not benefiting from the milk. And that brings out the aspect of stunted growth why do we have stunted children in food-rich districts like Bushenyi? I found out that out of 268 households, 66 had cows, but in quantity, the amount of milk that was accessed or was given to children aged 0 to 2 years was less than 2 liters out of a production capacity of more than 9 liters per cow. So sometimes these big flagship programs don't directly benefit the children. So we need to do more. Then on how do we move from 5 to 60%, I think the Honorable explained it, bringing everybody on board. For us as a sector, the finance has always been saying, but Ministry of Gender, whose voice are you speaking? So we have also been guiding the local governments to really, during the bottom-up planning process, these issues that affect our community, which are not of capital investment nature, but of social nature, must be plugged out and be prioritized as areas for government support in terms of prioritizing our investments. Last week I was in a sub-county called Gizi in Kamwenge, and I said, what are your challenges? They said, we now have a Tamaka road, but there are issues government is not working on which affect us. And one of them was lack of access to information. Mothers were saying, we don't know what to do. And that brings out what the Honorable talked about, mothers not knowing what to do. The last comment I want to make, I agree with the senior colleague, Minister of Public Service, but I want to assure you that we worked with Save the Children Fund. That's what we're here. And for us as a ministry, for example, if we had to present senior management, it would have been me to present your report, not the author, because apparently we are engaged with Makerere University and other teaching institutions, and when it comes to dissemination, we take the lead. So let us receive his observation in good faith, because that facilitates feeding into the policy formulation, as the Honorable said. I agree with him.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Fred. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for this very wonderful panel.
I need your contact.
I think, Lillian, your question about how to bridge the gap from 5 to 60%, I think Patrick mentioned that through engagement with political and technical leaders, through which we bridge the policy evidence and the financing and policy formation, is an important process through which this gap can be filled. I think also Commissioner Fred did comment on that. So thank you very much. I would like now to ask the panel to please assume your seats once again. Thank you very much. Another round of applause, please. Thank you very much, colleagues who are online. Thank you so much, Anne, for your wonderful presentation of the report. And colleagues who are online, I would like to sign out, because when Bev takes to the stage, basically that will be the end of the event. So thank you so much. Everybody, Bev, I would like you to invite you to the podium, please, to make your closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll try to be very brief, even though I think some of us might be trapped in here for a little bit until the rain calms down, but nice to see some rain. As the report today points out, deprivation for children in Uganda persists. This deprivation means that it does not allow children and their families to achieve their full potential development results, and it results in intergenerational transmission of poverty. Children and their families then as well are not able to ride out or overcome those additional shocks that we continue to see, such as climate shocks and COVID-19, shocks that can set a family's economy back further and further to the point where they don't recover and cannot support their children in the way they deserve. Dr. Chusegye, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, and Commissioner Nigabirano have also demonstrated the evidence around the importance in investing in human capital, and emphasized, as does the report, that an investment in child-sensitive social protection is a minimal investment with maximum impact for Uganda's future economic growth and prosperity. A child-sensitive grant can have a direct impact on investing and developing Uganda's human capital, ensuring children's right and access to basic education and the nutritional foundations they need to become and be a part of a skilled and healthy workforce. The report also makes the case for equity, something we didn't talk a lot about today, but I want to go back and reemphasize the point for equity and the need to support those most in need, particularly children with disabilities, of whom most will need support across their entire life cycle. So what do we do to take forward all of this today? I want to answer the gentleman in the back his question, and a great question, and thank you for challenging us. First and foremost, I hope we take forward the passion, the intellect, and the facts and the evidence that were put forth today. It is clearly not just Save the Children alone that is a passionate advocate for an expanded social protection system. This panel has shown us that this is a shared passion in Uganda. Dear panelists, you've given us much evidence that is now impossible to ignore why we need to move forward together on the key recommendations in this report. So I will call on members of Parliament, the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and our key civil society partners, such as the Grandmothers Project, which I was so pleased to see here today, to work together to take forward this agenda. Just to highlight a couple of the key things we want to take forward, I'm not going to read all of the recommendations in the report. But first and foremost, we see this kind of big piece of low-hanging fruit. Simply by expanding the senior citizens grant from age 70 to 65 by 2023, we will increase indirect coverage for children between 6 and 11%. As the Honorable MP from Chikwega has stated, yes, that is good that we see some benefit from this senior citizen grant and that we see that the money is passed down for children's benefit and children's outcomes. But while we are developing a long-term social protection strategy, can we prioritize the implementation of the Child Disability Grant and make provisions for a universal child benefit? Dr. Chikwega has made clear the expanded impact on the economic development and long-term development outcomes for children when investing in children. The most interesting thing and something we want to emphasize is that just by investing 1% of Uganda's GDP, this could provide for that universal child benefit. That is a small investment for a huge development outcome. Finally, to complement an expanded child-sensitive social protection system, we need a multi-sectoral approach. Again, as the Honorable MP from Chikwega has stated, we need to simultaneously build the capacity of social, education, and health services and ensure they are also child-sensitive and identifying the continued existing capacity constraints, including financial and human resource needs. So to close, Save the Children stands ready to continue this close collaboration that this report has launched and commits to continued work with the Ministry of Gender, Labor, Social Development, the National Planning Authority, the Ministry of Education and Sports, the Ministry of Health, districts, and the Parliament, particularly the Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. In honor of World Children's Day tomorrow and the Child Rights Convention, let us ensure every child's right to a full, safe, and healthy development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bev. I think she deserves another round of applause. Bev, is someone who's really been working in the background. I think I would like to make special recognition of Mr. Michael Ochir-Chan, who actually coordinated this study at Save the Children. I would like also to recognize other colleagues. Can the Save the Children team please put your hands up wherever you are? Yes, these are the unsung heroes. You guys have no idea how much these guys have worked to make this beautiful event happen. So thank you so much. And please join me to thank Commissioner Fred Ngabirano, who also really, you know, before I knew about this study, Fred was already coordinating this work, working with Michael and other colleagues. So thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, panelists. I'm thanking you in my personal capacity. This is not a speech, because I know how difficult it is to organize an event like this and get panelists as brilliant as this. So guys, thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate and thank you for your support. Finally, technical team, please give yourselves a round of applause. You did a great job monitoring the stream. It's good. Thank you, Apt Media. You did a very good job. We are going to lunch. I hope everybody has their coupon. If you don't have a coupon, that desk should be able to sort you. Thank you very much. Have a blessed weekend. And this is just the beginning. We want to engage even further. Please share this report online. You saw the hashtag. Tell everybody about it. It's available on our YouTube channel, so people don't have to worry that they missed this one. It's going to be available. And Save the Children does some really great work. If you Google it, you'll find it. Thank you.
Honorable members who didn't register, go to the table at the entrance and register so that our report captures your presence. Thank you.
Yes, small announcement. So lunch will be on the restaurant, so on the ground floor. Go back towards the entrance and then to the left.
Record.